Hey guys, Eric Verus Engineering, and today we are doing the install manual on Kyle McHugh's car. We have an oil cooler that is going to basically be replacing this driver's side or left-hand side auxiliary radiator. Ultimately, what this is going to do is by reducing the coolant's need to actually cool the oil. So basically, Andrew Brownfield from Toyota was running his Supra on track and he was seeing 280-degree oil temps, and the factory system, that 280-degree oil temp is being cooled by the radiator system. It's based on the block. There's a heat exchanger that does water to oil. So we're basically going to be completely deleting that, and we're going to be going oil to air, which removes that coolant's need to cool that oil. So by reducing that coolant's need to cool the oil, we're going to also increase the capacity of the oil system, and we're going to increase the capacity of the coolant system to actually cool the engine. Cooler oil will also allow the engine to run a little bit cooler as well, again, helping those coolant temps. We used quite a few tools during the install of this guy. So we have an 18mm socket, ratchet, 10mm socket, a bunch of extensions. I used 3/8 drive to 1/4 inch drive adapter to get those I believe it was T30, let me see here. So T30, we have a T47 Torx as well, 16mm. We have a bunch of extensions, 10mm fits-em-alls or monkey wrenches, small screwdriver, scissors, 10mm wrench, 8mm and a 10mm side cuts, 1 inch on a 1/2 inch drive. That was for the fittings on the top. A screwdriver, pick. Expect a bunch of extensions and a wobbly to get to those bolts on the adapter plate on the engine. And then we also have, what was it? Oh, 4mm Allen wrench, and then also a 1/4 inch drive Allen wrench, or 1/4 inch, period. And that's for the -6 fitting. We're also gonna have to be messing with some coolant and oil, so be sure to have coolant and oil on hand, whatever you guys need there. Let's get to it. All right, so first part of the install, we're gonna get that wheel off. Let's take off this driver wheel, and then we're going to get this fender liner out of the way. So just this front half, it looks like it's a bunch of 8mm. Yeah, a bunch of 8mm, maybe a clip. All right, so now that we have the fender liner off, we have this auxiliary radiator. I believe this looks like this is a CSF unit. So this is not the factory. Your factory unit will look a little bit differently. Not a big deal though, because we're basically removing it anyway. We have a few water connections. There's a water connection, there's a water connection. And then we also have this bracket. If you're running the factory steel bracket, it's gonna come off the same way, which is basically a few bolts on this side, and then that whole thing comes off. But for this one, it's just a little bit smaller, and it looks like it's aluminum instead of steel. So very similar, and we'll do that here shortly. I'm going to get this guy removed, and then we're gonna remove that bracket and go from there. All right, so we have the aux radiator now loose. The brackets are removed. There was a T47 Torx, so this guy, one here, and one here. So one from the rear, 2 from the side, and then we had 3 19mm, which go like through the frame rail. So 1, 2, 3, and then those brackets come off, and then the bracket comes off with the duct, like so, and it has 2 push pins on it, which we will reuse those push pins, and we will be reusing that OEM duct, which is really nice to go to the bumper. From here, I think I'm gonna try and drain the coolant, and we will be right back after I figure out the best way to do that. Sounds like it. All right, so we removed the underbody aluminum panel. That's gonna be 16mm bolts, and then some 8mm bolts back here, like along the sides. I don't think there's any up here, but there's 2 and 3, 4 back there, and then 1 right there, and then a bunch of 16mm, and then that comes down and we're gonna start draining the coolant in some fashion as a result. All right, so at this point, we're going to drain the coolant. We're gonna grab a flathead screwdriver. We're going to, well, some of the coolant. We don't need to drain all of the coolant. Smaller screwdriver, we're gonna go in the center right here. We're gonna pull it and hopefully get it to lock. Maybe not. And this should just pull off. Wow, now we're just making a mess everywhere. Sweet. All right, so it appears to access that heat exchanger block on the engine block. We're gonna remove this guy, a bunch of 8mm. So we're gonna remove that real quick, get this off. And I believe we can actually see what we're working with. And right up there, that is what we're gonna be removing. That's the heat exchanger block. So it's an oil to water or water to oil heat exchanger. We're also gonna remove this rear fender liner. It's gonna be a few push pin dealios here and then some, looks like 10mm nuts and 8mm bolts. That's gonna allow us access to that heat exchanger once again. So I'm gonna do that really quickly. All right, so here's the little window and the fender liner. There's obviously the damper. In here, and obviously I'm not doing the greatest job of throwing a flashlight and a camera in there, so you can't really see, but basically there's the heat exchanger. And we're gonna have to get to that bolt up top, probably with a Torx and a wobbly, something like that. Let me see, can we get a good image of that? It's like right there. Anyway, when you're in person, you can see it a lot better. And then we're also probably gonna have to go from the bottom and get a bunch of those bolts as well, which we'll see up here. So there's it is again. So we're gonna get all those bolts out and take that heat exchanger out. All right, so I'm gonna go over what I did to get this guy out. So this is how it actually sits on the engine block. I bought these three bolts from the bottom. I got this one from the bottom hole. Whoa, it's leaking still. Bottom hole in the fender right there. And then I got these last two from the top hole in the fender, a bunch of extensions, and that's a T30 Torx, by the way. So not fun, but the good thing is our unit's gonna go on a little bit easier because it's pretty shallow. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now. All right, so at this point on the install, we have our adapter plate. This is gonna be anodized black, probably a logo like right here, or maybe right here. But right now we're throwing a, I'm not gonna say pre-production, this is a production unit, but pre-ano because they're actually sitting at ano right now, getting coated. We're gonna throw these -10 O-ring bosses in there. I will let you know what size. I would recommend doing this now because it sounds like it'd be a pain in the butt on car. And then I also don't know, we will probably be installing this here, but if we don't, we're gonna throw a -6 O-ring boss plug on that spot. That is gonna be probably like a, I don't know, some type of standard hex. But yeah, we'll throw that on real quick and then I'll show you what that looks like. All right, guys, we have this now assembled. We have the -10 O-ring bosses to -10 flare. These two fittings are for the oil. We have the -6 O-ring boss cap or plug. That is an O-ring boss again, and that is -6. That is tightened with a 1/4 inch Allen internal drive. These are tightened with a 1 inch external hex. I used a socket on a 1/2 inch drive, like so. This is gonna go back on the vehicle. This passage right here allows the coolant to circulate. These are gonna be the in and out for the oil cooler. This is gonna go back on the engine. We're gonna tighten and use the OEM fasteners to about 6 to 8 foot-pounds. That is plenty of torque, especially based off of how loose they were from the factory or whoever installed this last. Once again, this part is gonna be black anodized from us. It's gonna have a laser engraved logo. This is a production model, but because we have the units at Anno and we're trying to bring this to market as quickly as possible, I kept one back and we're gonna throw a raw one on Kyle's car. No issues there though. What else should I say? I'm gonna do this install off camera because you're just basically gonna be looking at me throwing my hands in places that they shouldn't go, getting upset, frustrated, you know. This is tons of fun. It's actually not that bad, but it's not fun either. Again, these 2 bolts are probably gonna be, actually these left 3 bolts are gonna be through the fender, and then these right side 4 are gonna be through the bottom of the car. This one might be able through the bottom of the car now, especially because we no longer have this gigantic brick in the way. So we'll be able to get like a ratchet in there. Let's do that. Again, doing that off camera real quick, and we're gonna clean that block surface as well really quickly. All right, so it is now installed on the vehicle. Painful to see with video. I tried, I failed. I will throw up some pictures here. Anyway, it's that plate with the dash 10 ANs, flares on it, and we're gonna basically run some lines to that after we work in this area. So we're now going to install our oil cooler and the bracket to the chassis, and we're also going to fix these lines. We're basically gonna run the lines so that they now loop instead of going to that cooler. They will function like factory otherwise, so we'll be good there. I'm gonna lower it a little bit so I can actually reach because I'm short, and then we'll go from there. On that note, to install that plate, I actually was able to tighten all the T30 bolts from the bottom because our plate is not a gigantic brick. It's pretty thin, so you can kind of get a small, I did everything with a 1/4-inch drive ratchet. You can get a 1/4-inch drive ratchet up there and tighten everything. Actually very easy in comparison to pulling that unit, that factory unit off. So keep that in mind. I don't know, words of wisdom, whatever you want to say there. All right, so basically the order of operations do matter. You need to install these to 90 degrees before we install the cooler on the bracket. 90 degrees fittings go on, tighten them all the way onto the cooler, and then as long as they face rearward roughly, we're gonna eventually clock them towards this way on car. But when I tightened it all the way, like you can see here, I can't go any further. So I backed it off so that I have this much wiggle room on car. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. But now we're gonna actually throw the cooler onto the bracket. So we have our M6 hardware. I'll flip it this way so you guys can see what's going on. Gonna do our best to kind of like slide this guy in there. Maybe, seems like bottom first maybe. All right, and then the one thing that I want to point out, so when you get to this point, you actually want to grab like a screwdriver or plastic spatula, or not spatula, something to actually grab this shield. So right now it's kind of like squishing up against the core, and then we have some fins. I know you guys can't see that. Maybe you can see it now. We have some fins right here, right? So right at this point, right at this moment, hopefully you can kind of see what I'm talking about right here. So this shield is kind of coming up against this, and we're kind of getting some resistance, which is fine. It's not a big deal. What I'm more interested in is trying to actually get airflow through those top fins. So we're actually gonna go grab like a small screwdriver. As we get close here, I'm actually going to grab this, push it down, and I'm actually gonna pull this shield up and on top of the cooler, like that. And then we have this inlet duct basically fully encompassing those fins and everything. And then obviously, as you can see, we also have on this side we have the tabs and then no tabs. No tabs go on the outside. That's because basically this is going up against the bumper. Not against the bumper, but we have very little clearance. If we left these tabs on, they actually won't fit on the bumper. So we're gonna then install the M6 hardware. But I wanted to make sure that you guys saw that. Like that's good for, I don't know, probably 5% more cooling. Now we're gonna throw some bolts on there. Little known fact in the aftermarket, ducting is actually as important, if not more important, than the cores themselves. If you don't get airflow through the core, you don't get cooling. Surprise! Good cores help too. We're using PWR because they're awesome. All right, so something I really want to emphasize here is how nice this ductwork is on the core. This doesn't always happen, and I just want to show how, oh, here we go, show how nice it is. So basically, like, this is all covered, all those fins are covered, this is covered, all those fins are covered, the bottom, all of it's encompassed by the factory, and same on this side. Like, it's actually really, really nice how everything goes together in this kit, and that's gonna really push that performance envelope higher. So just wanted to highlight that. And then this is basically we're gonna bolt on the car right now. So we're gonna bolt this assembly up. We're gonna use these 2 bolt holes like factory, and I believe this one like factory, and then the other ones don't need to be used. But at the end of the day, this is a really nice little package that's gonna shed some significant heat. All right, so we have the assembled unit. We're gonna throw this guy on this part of the car with those factory bolts, and then we're gonna put the factory bolts back in where they need to go, obviously, as well. So we're gonna do that really quick. All right, so we have this coolant line, 3/4 inch coolant hose right there, and we have 2 adapters. We're gonna zip tie this up out of the way so it's really nice and clean. That's kind of on that back side of that brake duct, by the way. And then we also have, if we zoom out a little bit, the oil cooler is installed. And again, like we put all the factory bolts back in, even though the brackets aren't there. So like right here, there used to be a bracket bolt. We're not using that. We just went through the chassis because I'm assuming that's actually important. It looks like a very important bolt. So we torque that down, and then we put the 2 that go through the bracket right there, 1 that goes through the bracket there. And then this guy is stout. Like, I could probably hang off of it. I'm not going to, but I could probably hang off of it. Oil cooler's installed. We're now gonna start figuring out the lines at this point, and then we can actually start running those lines, and we're also gonna zip tie some stuff. So I'm gonna go throw some zip ties on stuff, but we're gonna figure out the lines.
Okay. You can see the routing now. There's a little bit of a bend because obviously it's got some extra length, but it then runs to you'll see this through where the ABS pump is, past the AC hard lines, behind the coolant reservoir, behind the frame support, and into the core.
All right, so what we did here was we got basically the AN lines installed finally. These will be pre-built and pre-crimped, super nice lines. We have the oil cooler installed, and before I installed this line and this outside fitting, I actually took the outside fitting back off and I pre-filled the oil cooler. Rough estimate is about 0.6 liters roughly, quarts. Same, roughly. We'll probably get a number on that, and we'll actually do the fluid volume before we release the kit. And then Alex can put it right here. Again, coolant lines back there, nicely tucked away. We've zip tied some lines. Again, the big thing with lines, keep it away from moving components and keep them away from hard and sharp components. So we're gonna zip tie those stainless braided lines away from anything sharp, and definitely from, it looks like, I don't know which pulley is over there, but there's a pulley over there. We're gonna make sure that we keep it this way towards the frame rail. And then on the bottom side, we went with 290s. The 290s are going towards the front of the car. 2 lines come up straight on the outer fitting, 45 on the inner fitting, and then those just go up and over the frame rail really nice. They're actually not even touching the frame rail, so I'm not worried about that. Oil cooler's not gonna move. The engine's gonna move a little bit, but it shouldn't move to the point where the lines are gonna touch, and they're stainless as well. I think that we're gonna go do the coolant bleed procedure, and then we're gonna make sure that no fittings are leaking. So we're gonna do that real quick, and then the install is basically finished. We obviously have to put everything back together, but not too bad if you consider like 8 hours bad or good, I don't know.